Welcome everyone to our monthly Lunch and Learn series with Up2Us Sports. If you're unfamiliar with our organization, our mission is to engage, train, and support sports coaches to transform youth, programs, and communities. And so the backbone of our organization, Up2Us Sports, our mission is the work that's being done by our partners, our local community sports organizations across the country, and of course, our Up2Us Sports coaches and Vista capacity developers. And so as a result of the virtual lifestyle that we're all living during this time, we developed this virtual Lunch and Learn series to be a space for all of us to join together, to share, to learn from each other, and to highlight the incredible work from all of our partners. And so, excuse me, one quick note, this will be an interactive session. We encourage your participation via video, audio, the chat function, but we also acknowledge that not everyone may be in that space. So if you're here to just listen, we just ask that you put an asterisk at the front of your name for our information. So on to the exciting part. Today, we're joined by Students Run Philly Style, a sports-based youth development program in Philadelphia. Students Run Philly Style serves youth in grades 6 through 12 with the mission to transform students' lives through running and mentorship, pairing running leaders with students to train towards the goal of completing a full or half marathon. As an acknowledgement to the great work that this organization is doing, here are some highlights from a recent impact study on Students Run Philly Style, showing significant improvements in self-confidence, academic achievement, and reduction in incidences of violent behavior. So join me in applauding the Students Run Philly Style team here on this call by dropping some applause emojis. So today we're joined by Ieshia Nelson and Lauren Kobylarz, who will be facilitating a session titled Retention, then Recruitment, a new take on volunteer management during and after COVID-19. Ieshia is the Associate Director of Mentoring and Training and has been with Students Run Philly Style for over 4 years. Before that, she served as a running leader with the organization for over 5 years. Ieshia has earned a bachelor's in urban studies and a master's in education from Temple University. She's currently an adjunct faculty member at Temple University, teaching courses on youth culture and adolescent development. Lauren is the program director and has been with Students Run Philly Style for over 6 years, having served as a mentor and running leader for over 4 years before that. Lauren has a bachelor's in English from Duke University and a master's in public administration from the University of Pennsylvania. So we thank Ieshia and Lauren for joining us today, and without further ado, Ieshia and Lauren, take it away.
Thanks so much. So I guess Lauren's gonna be producing for us today. So she's gonna share her screen. And then while she's getting ready for that though, we thought a quick, cool little icebreaker. Win did us up with his poll. So I don't know if we can beat that. But what we were hoping you could do today is just share with us maybe one thing that you're hoping to learn today, or one thing you were hoping to get out of this session. So if you want to share that in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and share with us.
While you're doing that, I'll put this up on the screen, start sharing, and get it going.
Awesome. So we have some people looking forward specifically to the retention part of this, maybe how to avoid some volunteer burnout. That is facts. Definitely our volunteers who have stayed with us through this process have definitely taken a big deep dive. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Whether volunteers are worth the time on certain projects given, how much time they have to put into it, how much time you have to train them, versus support them. So we are going to talk a little bit about kind of making sense of a volunteer experience and opportunity, what that get is. So that's going to be a big part of this. So so far, I think we are in a position to please a little bit, but we definitely are, open to questions, comments, concerns throughout this. We're going to do a little bit of a case study on Students Run today. So you all will be looking at our materials, kind of helping us think through what the give-get are. And then hopefully we can give you some questions to take back to your organization that can really help you critically think about some of these things. How to engage in recruitment for youth and volunteers in this remote and virtual landscape. Perfect. All right, Lauren, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. Well, you can see my screen, right, Ieshia? Good.
Yes.
Just checking. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Our title of our kind of talk today is about retention and then recruitment. That's very intentional to put retention first, because during this time, Students Run's gone through a lot of changes, as I think most SBYD organizations have, during COVID, during this past year. It is coming to a close. So excited about that. And so for us, some of the more visible pieces of our program were kind of stripped away. And so we really have been thinking a lot about what we really do as a youth development organization, which is really building relationships and encouraging personal growth. So today we're going to talk about, how to make sense of the chaos right now and how to move your organization's volunteer force forward as you rebuild. And really, Wynn talked about, we work with students in grades 6 through 12, but we work with the 400 volunteers to make that possible. So we work with about 1,500 youth each year, but 400 volunteers really lead our programming, in addition to a staff of 14. So we're small staff, but our on-the-ground work really takes place through volunteers. So we are volunteer powered to the max. And so really excited to talk to you all about that today. Also just wanted to thank Up2Us for having us. Wynn and Katie have been great prepping us. And I know a lot of you are part of Up2Us. So we have two Up2Us staff with us as well. We have a part-time Up2Us coach based here in Philly and a marketing vista. So it's been great being part of the Up2Us family as well. Let me just see here. So I talked a little bit about where Students Run's been this year. COVID-19 has sort of upended our program in a lot of ways. As Wynn said, we're a 9-month volunteer-led mentoring SBYD program that engages youth through long distance running. So our students start training 9 months and then they end up running a long distance race up to and including a full marathon. So most of our students accomplish at least a 10-mile run throughout the year, at most a 26.2-mile full marathon. But this year, those major races like the Philadelphia Marathon and the Blue Cross Broad Street Run, Philly's home to the largest 10-mile race in the country, and we're the largest group in it. None of those happened this year. So we had no marathon, no key races. It kind of led to lower participation rates, fewer new students, fewer new volunteers, and a lot of uncertainty for us as a program. We also, all of us, I believe, tackled and dealt with a lot of social unrest that highlighted the racial injustices that take place in this country and the need for our stakeholders to really understand our work through a social justice lens. So we began kind of permission asking and prepping people to discuss those topics. And to do that, we really needed our volunteers to commit to our program at a level beyond running. So all of the big running stuff that I think is very shiny for our program was stripped away this year. And so it really highlighted, I think, what's at the core of what we're doing. So Ieshia led a really wonderful session this summer with our students and leaders on social justice issues. We were really explicit about our approach to creating a more inclusive and equitable space in our sport, and sharing, expecting that approach from our volunteers and stakeholders. We also learned that not all of our volunteers have stuck with us during this time. We did see some people drop off for various reasons. Some of them maybe because of what we were asking, and some of them maybe because of the the pandemic that we're experiencing. So that was important to us to notice. Not everyone stuck with us when some of those big pieces of our program were taken away.
Yeah, and so it was important for us to incorporate like this approach into our work all the time. We didn't want to wait until there was another pandemic or, unfortunately, another incident that highlighted, like Lauren said, some of the racial injustices in the world to then talk to our volunteers about that. For years, we knew our statistics. And so about 70% of our volunteers are teachers in the Philadelphia School District. And the majority of all of our students go to Philadelphia public schools. And so with that being said, our program is very reflective of that. And so a lot of our volunteers are white and a lot of our students are Black and brown. And so we just felt it very important to make sure that we're ready for future opportunities to bring on volunteers that are at the level of the volunteers that stuck with us through this 6 weeks, where we really did a deep dive into racial inequity and predispositions to certain health disparities in our community and in Philadelphia. And so we have a research team with Temple, and the results indicate that sports may be a hook to retain our students and volunteers, but we learned that it isn't the end all be all. Like, so when those running things got taken away, we had some people who really, like we said, kind of took a deep dive with us to really to look at who we are, what we do, how we do it, and like how we want to change the future of running, and how we want to, begin to change the landscape for our students. And so we came up with this idea of retention first and then recruitment. And so the volunteers who are working with us without our normal sports are really aligned to our values and expectations. And we wanted to keep that at the core and then figure out how we're recruiting others at their level and making that more explicit as we go forward.
And thanks, when the masks are really cool. That's Ieshia and I. This is what our job is now. Bundling up, masking up. It's kind of a nice segue into our next slide, which shows us a little bit, a little bit of before and after here. And Ieshia's going to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we just thought it would be fun to have a visual representation of what our world used to look like. And so as you can see, we have our students who are crossing the finish line at the Philadelphia half and full marathon. And there they are with their mentors, with each other to now. And so we created a virtual series of races. We had some opportunity to distribute Garmin watches to our students. We started a Strava group with some step challenges. And so we were really able to utilize the virtual space to engage our students and leaders. We spent a ton of money on gear. So making sure that people had masks, that they had water packs throughout the summer because the water fountains were turned off due to COVID and some other things. And so we really took a pulse from our community around their needs and what they needed to continue running. And so running is at the core of what we do. And we wanted to make sure that that mainstay was there for people and we could do it as safely as possible. We had a whole training around COVID-19. But then you can see here our students kind of solo, socially distanced, masked up, but still showing those medals because we got to participate in virtual Broad Street. We put on a 20K. We have a counterpart organization in LA. So we did a 2020 Coast to Coast Challenge with Students Run LA. And so we just thought we'd highlight the heart and soul of our program, which is our students and our volunteers.
Yeah. And I promise they're smiling under those masks. I promise they are. I think we're getting used to the smiles with the masks on. So today, we just wanted to put out a couple of objectives for you all. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand the components we're going to talk about with sense making and explore sort of how your organization can channel sense making to strengthen volunteer retention and recruitment as you rebuild. So I know a lot of people on here are from Up2Us, so hopefully this can give you some knowledge to take back to the organizations that you work with, or if you are part of an SBYD organization that does on the ground work, hopefully you can take that directly to your program. So after today, we think it'd be helpful for you to spend some time thinking about what is that volunteer force that you're trying to capture and move forward, and what is its role in your organization's success. So that's something for you all to think about as we go through this here. And so we're going to talk a little bit through sense making and how you can kind of help people understand what you're looking for in a volunteer and how to move your organization forward. So Ieshia's going to talk us through the first piece, which is about sense making.
So has anyone ever heard of sense making? Show of hands, emojis, thumbs up, thumbs down. Oh, P.S. I love all the shout outs to Students Run LA. I see that.
Looks like you had some hands up, some hands down, Ieshia.
Okay, cool. So there's this kind of growing interest in like studying the process that people use to make sense of systems that they belong to, and like how do diverse people look at the world through different lenses, and how do they kind of collectively come together and make sense of that. And so as Lauren and I were thinking through this particular workshop and our own experience around our own volunteer retention and recruitment, and also commitment going into kind of, I mean, COVID was an everyday revelation for us. And so really our volunteers and students who stayed on board entrusted us to really make sense of what Students Run would be as time went on. And so I'm sure in your different cities, you went through different phases. So we were in a red phase, a yellow phase, we went to light green at some point, and then we jumped into green and fell back out. And so it really was, we were as a staff entrusted in, like, again, like I said, helping our students, leaders, and their families really make sense of what it looked like during this time. Sense making, we chose to use the Snowden model, is really a system to help you kind of think about the components that are influencing how people, to think about how people are experiencing your organization or the time that you share together. And so there's the internal and external versus the collective and individual experience all happening at the same time. And so this model really just demonstrates that it's usually a centralized activity. So for us, that is running. You would define that activity by what your organization does. And that's really the collective thing that we're all doing. And then there's data sharing. And so that's what your organization shares online. Those are those reports that go out. That's the social media. And there are situations and interactions. And so that's really the internal individual. And so those are really the relationships and the conversations that are being built and happening between our mentors and students as they're running on their team. And so the final quadrant of the model is this idea of mental modeling. And so that's what we want to like kind of focus on today, and really talk about how we influence your volunteer cohort through helping them make sense of these experiences and conversations that they're having through this activity that you're doing and what your organization is putting out to the public.
Yeah, it's also the area where you all have the most influence in this space. The situations and interactions, when you have volunteers, it's usually outside of your view. But the mental modeling is an individual piece that you can actually influence. And that's what we're hoping to get to today. So mental modeling is really about how a person makes sense of their experiences. So thinking about that, we had to kind of do this remotely, and we want to just sort of help other people get ahead of the game and have these conversations, you know, like Ieshia said, all the time. And so we really wanted to think about helping other organizations like we did have to be explicit in your values so that your volunteers are really clear on what to expect from you. So for us, this summer we spent a lot of time talking about social justice. That became an expectation for us that, you need to be ready to come and be part of our community means being part of that conversation. And so being a little bit more explicit about that is something we want to continue, so that when someone new comes to our program, they know that up front, and then we don't necessarily, they know what they're getting into, if that makes sense. And then the second piece that we feel like you can influence that mental modeling is really have your volunteers assess their give and get of what to expect to give and what to expect to get from their time with the program. We've talked a lot about this in the last couple months, but we feel like volunteering, people come and say, I want to give, I'm doing service, like this isn't about me. And we totally agree with that, because we all know, I think working with kids, it's not about you. But we also want to acknowledge that there are things people are looking to get from this type of experience, whether they want to or not. So we're really going to dive into that here in a couple of minutes. So think about, what are people expecting to give to your program when they volunteer, and what are they expecting to receive? Sometimes I think our volunteers get things they didn't expect, and we think being a little bit more clear about those things up front might be helpful. So for example, a lot of people come into our program expecting they're going to run a marathon and they're going to run with a student. But what they might not expect to get from it is like maybe their training is more consistent, or maybe they're more motivated than they were coming in. So we really want people to think about both sides of service in volunteering with our program. We really also want to think about removing the stigma or shame that might come with this kind of question, because service is more than just being absolutely selfless. I think it's okay to be a little bit selfish at times, or at least acknowledge that I'm going to get something out of this too. So we really want to develop a chance for people to be authentic in their volunteer role and really have some deep growth from their experience with us, so that they can have conversations that matter and change, and experiences that will change them.
And what we found—
you want to add there, Ieshia?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and what we found this summer is that the type of conversation that we were having, you really needed to bring your full self. And so if you're coming into this experience as a volunteer, which is like, I'm just here to help, it really didn't serve us when we got the conversations that were just like about human connection, right? It wasn't about like, I'm being part of this conversation because I want to help this young person make sense of the world, but it was really us making sense of the world together. And so we needed everybody's like lived experience, needed them to really be able to express that, to really make the conversations rich and in depth. So that, like what Lauren said is like, so true, that like authenticity and the depth and growth was there, because everybody had to acknowledge that that these conversations were beneficial to them in some way, even if it's that we all want to see a better world. We want to see a more inclusive running landscape. We want to see that look more diverse.
So for the next piece of this, we're going to we have a little bit of an activity plan, and we had talked with Wynn and Katie about really putting ourselves out there, and we're totally willing to do that. But before we do that, we're going to give you a little bit of insight into our program. Ieshia, do you want to maybe set this up while I work on the breakout?
Yeah, and I guess I'm going to answer Paul's question. So you said, do we have a specific, and Lauren, you can answer it too. It says, do we have a specific question that we use to get this kind of assessment for a potential volunteer? So I will say that we don't necessarily have a question initially from the jump where we ask about the give-get, but because we are we do a group mentoring model, and so we're not like one-on-one, you're paired with the student and running. Typically, it's a group of adult volunteers who host a team, and so there needs to be a minimum of 2 volunteers at practice, and practice has to happen 3 days a week on our training plan. And we do have a session where the team has to sit down and come up with some kind of rules of engagement amongst themselves. And so in that, we really talk to them around like what the purpose, like, kind of what this and the goals are for their team, for their community, why they're starting kind of students run at their school. And so we don't do that specifically individually, one-on-one, but it is part of our kind of like group, I don't know if I would call it like group team orientation. So the leaders on that team really sit down and kind of come up with a game plan for leading the students through the season, if that helps. I think this summer we were a little bit more explicit because we were talking about, like we said, we were kind of talking about race inequity in our sport, and we were talking about the disproportionality of those affected by COVID-19. This summer, we asked very specific questions. And so we asked questions around identity, around belief, you know, kind of in running and access to that. And so those questions were super explicit around who we are and like what we believe. And so our leaders were able to participate in that with their students.
I don't know that I would have anything to add to that, Ieshia. I think that kind of answers it for me. So we're, I think we're good to move on. We're going to first, before we do a breakout session, Wynn's actually helping me set them up. Thanks, Wynn. We're going to kind of do a little bit of modeling with you all first to kind of like preview what we do in the breakout session. And so Ieshia, if you want to explain that, I'll get the video up and running and we'll be good to go.
Cool. All right. So we are going to show you a few images and messages about SRPS, and then have you list what you might expect to give and get as a volunteer in our program. So we've curated a few things. I believe Lauren is going to give you a link so that you can look through those, and then we'll come back, reconvene, and share out what you would expect by seeing what we put out would be a volunteer experience with Students Run. Again, you're looking at what do you, based on what you see, what do you believe your expectations are in terms of what you're giving as a volunteer, and then what are your expectations as the volunteer.
So we're going to do a practice first. You all are, I believe, used to the Up2Us way. So we're going to start with the practice, model it out. We're going to start by showing you one material that was actually developed by our students 2 years ago. It's a video about us that's really geared towards recruitment. So today we've been talking about retention and recruitment. We're going to show you, it's 2 minutes here. I'm going to show you this 2-minute video and then come back as a group here and ask you what you might expect to give or get when you watch after watching this video and learning a little bit about us. So I will get it started here. Just to make sure you can hear my sound. Sharing sound.
My mentors taught me that I'm much more capable of what I thought I am. So he keeps me on my toes. He pushes me to go further. I did my first full marathon practice the other day, and I never thought I'd be at the point where I would run a full marathon.
I joined Students Run as a leader specifically because I was looking for not just a volunteer opportunity in Philadelphia, but a volunteer opportunity that made me feel like I was part of a family.
You know, you especially see the force, like the sheer force of the organization and the impact of what this organization is at the races all over the city, where all of the teams from all over Philadelphia come together to accomplish one goal, to cross the finish line. And also during these practices and races, students cheer on and encourage their peers on the sidelines or running alongside them. And they also meet goals that they also never thought possible, which is really amazing.
I'm running with other students before the program. I heard about the program from a colleague of mine, and she showed me the website, and I went to the first leadership training, and the rest was history. Who are we?
Students.
What do we do? Run! How do we do it? All right. I haven't heard that cheer in so long. It's so nice to kind of hear it. That's like, you know, I just watched it earlier too, but it still makes me smile. So I think we just wanted to kind of get a sense, you know, you watched one thing. If you wanted to type in the chat, one thing that you'd either give or you think you'd either be giving or getting by being part of our organization. You can just sort of write give and then what that idea might be, or get and what that idea might be. We just wanted to kind of give you all a space to practice and share here before we do our breakout. And Ieshia, maybe if you want to kind of curate that, that'd be great.
Cool. So we got some gets: our family connection, a sense of belonging, family again, gonna get some self-confidence. Someone also wrote give as family, which is interesting. You're gonna get fit, and with the purpose and motivation to do so, helping kids know that they are capable. Some community connection, encouragement is what we're gonna give. The give get is a sense of purpose, give motivational leadership.
Awesome. All right, you think you all have it ready to go with the big, oh, so there's some more. I didn't mean to cut you all off. I see
no worries.
give, paying it forward, getting to share the sport activity you love. We all love that, I know. All right. Okay, so we're gonna, our next piece here is to actually break out into a breakout room. We're gonna share a little more with you all. We've got a couple more materials of what you might see or a way to kind of learn about us. So I'm gonna drop a link in the chat and I'll message it out to the breakout rooms, but I'm gonna put it in the chat before we open the breakout room so that you can click on it ahead of time. Because we know that it's sometimes hard to go back and forth once you're in the breakout room. So I'm going to put that link in the chat in just a second here. And you all should be able to access it. So if you're going to be in a breakout room, take a minute here, click, oops, sorry. Got ahead of myself with my screen. I'm losing the chat. So you should all be able to click into this Google Drive folder. Should be able to see a couple different materials from us. We'll give you a couple minutes as a group to look at them and kind of make your own give and get lists of what you think you might expect from us, looking at our recruitment materials in your breakout. Then we'll come back together and hopefully you can share back with us some great thoughts. Any questions? Anyone have any thoughts or questions about that? We're ready? All right, cool. Wynn, if you can open up those rooms, that would be great. Welcome back, everyone. I think we're all back. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool. Wynn, thanks so much for setting that up for us. And so, you know, I think we'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you thought. You got a little bit of a snapshot of our materials. So yeah, if anyone's willing to share, Ieshia is going to kind of facilitate. I'm going to take some notes because that's what I love to do. And Ieshia's going to kind of solicit some feedback from you all.
Sorry, I gotta unmute myself. Yeah, so Lauren's gonna take some notes. So if initially we just want to share, if anybody wants to share back from their group, maybe some of the give gets that they found based on the materials that they viewed.
I can go first. So our group, we talked a little bit about how human beings tend to be meaning-seeking creatures. You know, we're looking for meaning in our lives, and so one of the things I think that we want to get, just to go to that side, is a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. But that sense of meaning, I think, is very connected to this idea of love as well, which is, you know, as I was saying to our group, I tend to be fairly cynical, but I think that at the core, human beings want to recognize that we're all interconnected and want to give back love. And I think that's the give. I think when someone is volunteering, what they're really giving is, you know, some aspect of love, which is saying, you know, I want to give my time, I want to give of myself to you. And we think those two things are fairly interconnected, which is why I think we volunteer. Broadly speaking, you know, more specifically, we may want to volunteer in an arts program because the arts mean something really to us versus running. But it's all coming, I think, from the fact that we're meaning-seeking creatures and want a purpose, whether it's raising kids, whether it's volunteering, whether we find it in our own personal relationships, whatever it might be. So that's kind of the theme of what our group talked about. I don't know, Mariana or Robin or Frank, if you guys want to add anything, but.
I'll go next. In our group, we were discussing that get of community. And even so that we're in a pandemic, we're able to, you know, this is like a sport. This is something, an activity that you can still accomplish during these difficult times and still feel connected to one another when we can't really, you know, hang out or do other social events. So it's still a fantastic way to be physically active and have a sense of community and connection.
Thanks, Danielle.
In our group, Courtney brought up a really good point. Yeah, I don't know if Courtney, if you wanted to share kind of what your thought was on this too.
Yeah, I can speak a little. I guess I was just saying, you know, we were talking a lot in our group as well about how running is very accessible, and in that way it kind of facilitates this togetherness. And it's one of the few sports where you're not competing against another team. So it really kind of allows people to, you know, develop that community and connect and feel the sense of camaraderie as well.
No gives yet?
Testing my spelling skills, right? Camaraderie, hardest word.
That's why we have spell check. It's great. Just go for it and then right click.
We didn't really talk about this in our group, but you just mentioned gives, and I was just wanted to say, like, if you're doing something and you're not getting something out of it yourself too, that really changes the power differential, because that's then you saying like, I don't need anything. I'm just here to give. I have everything, you know. So it puts the giver in sort of this higher power place, where if they're getting something out of it too, then it's more reciprocal or more on the same level. So I think it's a good idea to get something back when you're giving something, because I think that you know, flattens out that power differential a bit.
Yeah, I want to echo that, Hillary. I think that's a really good point. Setting those expectations and really early, because I think a lot of burnout often comes from sort of giving and feeling like you're not supposed to get because it's volunteering or service. So then it leads to kind of like resentment or internal resentment or et cetera, and then burnout.
I kind of see give as like maybe cyclical in the sense that I think we often train people the way we were trained. So if you had a good mentor when you were running, you might pass that on to the youth that you're volunteering with. And the other biggest one is that you're giving up your time, and I think time's incredibly important.
So I just want to say that when we talked about love and you have it in the get section, we kind of talked about that as being what you're giving actually, because I mean there's that trope that it's better to give than to get, and I think it's a trope or cliche in part because it's true. I think a lot of us can probably recognize this in our own lives that it feels so good to give, and sometimes it's quite beautiful not to expect anything in return. This is the way we often parents raise their children, or the feelings we have for our pets. Again, this is deeply human, but this idea to give, I think, is what just giving of love, the sharing of that love, is what a lot of people who volunteer are in it for.
I'll also throw in that based on what you said, Mario, our Charm City member of our group, Blake, was saying that when you volunteer, you give your passion for something. I mean, people can learn skills to run, but unless they have a mentor who's passionate about it, they may not get the passion behind these activities. And that's one of the big things that volunteers do, is they give a sense of passion to an activity that otherwise could be missed over. And then I also want to point out the very simple one that I said is, in looking at the materials, you really get a sense of being part of Philadelphia, that you get a belonging to a city. And in large cities, that's really more and more critical to us as human beings.
That's a huge compliment for us, I feel like, just for the way we try to put ourselves out there. So thanks, that's really cool to hear. All of this is, to be honest. Cool. Any other thoughts? Last chance. Got a lot of good things in here. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at some of our stuff. So here's the part where we get to be a little more vulnerable with you. And I'm just going to share a little bit, share bigger here. Ooh, not that kind of share. Love doing this. So we've got some great things on our list here. I think, we took a look at this and made our own sort of internal list. And there's some stuff that we realize that I think we're putting across like pretty strongly as a program. I think there's some things that I think we really hit home on. And the things that you all mentioned are things that we feel like our volunteers come to us for and expect, which is great. And I think it has a lot to do with the messages that we're putting out there. But then in the last couple of months, we've been putting out some other messages, which I think would hit on different things that you all didn't put. So we kind of cheated and gave you a curated set of things, but we have some extra materials that we really feel strongly about as a program that are more social justice oriented, that I didn't put in your folder, but we are hoping to do more of this and put out more explicit messaging around our commitment to social justice as a program, because we really believe that what people are seeing matters and how they make sense of our program and what they might expect coming to our table. And so wanted to share this with you. We kind of were looking yesterday and we said, you know what, they're not going to say any of this because that's not been in our materials before. And so, this is the type of stuff that we have realized is kind of a weakness for us in terms of our sense making, like our helping of sense making for our volunteers. And so, yeah, we knew it. I said, I know what they're not going to say, any of the things. And you know why? It's because we didn't help you make sense of our program that way. And so that, I think, is something that we're really trying to do as we look towards first retention, which I think is where we are, and then recruitment in the new year.
Yeah.
So anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, you said it, like, these are some things that if you had time and went through our social media, you would see, and they're super important to us. But it's, our job to really define and communicate our organization's values with our volunteers and our audience. And so what are we, putting forth first and foremost that really draws people into like our mission, our purpose, and knowing that they can come alongside us in this work. And like you said, kind of find that love, find that joy, find a quality place to give their time. And so, yeah, so we cheated a little bit and knew that maybe these things that, you know, are important to us, we also realized at the beginning, the example that we gave is that when we had to kind of, when our other things were stripped away, those races and, you know, the fun things that we can do, when we get to the heart of why we really do this work, we had to kind of negotiate with people around the expectations of our give-get in terms of like where the conversations were going to go with our students, and how we as an organization were kind of going to start, we don't, you know, like shaping kind of those like mentor-mentee relationships. But yeah, now people said, Lauren, seeing this, they're thinking through a whole nother set of like give-gets.
Yeah. So we're like, you know, we're proving our own point here is that only the things people know are what you tell them. And so when you're thinking about sense making and how you can really, that explicitness is so hard because you only get so many moments to share your story. And so your elevator pitch, I'm sure you've all heard that, your like quick messages, your words really matter in how people perceive your organization. And so we have a couple of questions and considerations that we're thinking about and hopefully will help you think about for your organization as well. So these are just sort of what we've been thinking about as we're like thinking through retention and recruitment. We've been using these questions to really reflect on and acknowledge what's on brand for us and what's not. Such a hard thing to do, especially when these are deep and deep value driven things. And so these messages they require a lot of conversations. What holds true for you as an organization and what doesn't? And so, you know, how do you use those answers to influence your sense making? So we've got some questions on the left side in white are sort of for you to think through with your staff. And it's something that we're going to be kind of implementing a little more with our staff and really getting to know each other and think about, why do you come to this work? Why do you do this work? Why do we as an organization do this work? But then why did you individually come here to do this work? What do potential volunteers look for from our staff? What do we offer our volunteers and what do they come for? Those are some of the kind of give questions. See where we're going there. And then on the right side in the green, a little bit more focused on the get, the considerations that are a little more focused on the get. And so how do your organizations choose people who can contribute meaningfully? Paul, I think asked that in the beginning. What questions are you asking people? And that's, I think, up to each organization to figure out. How do we prioritize what we offer as an organization? If we can only have 5 minutes to share something, what do we share? You know, if we only have an hour to do a training with our volunteers, what are we training on? So how do we prioritize those things? It's really easy to prioritize, like this year, COVID, you saw our masks and all of our gear. We had so many COVID rules. We had to spend like 80% of our training time on rules. And it was like, but is that really important to what we're doing here? That's like a yes and answer. Yes, and, but really we want to spend our time talking about mentoring. So like really focusing on that question, I think is really important. And then finally, would our volunteers come for different reasons if we advertise different benefits? So I think like we just showed you, if, you know, would we have people coming to our table for a different reason depending on the messages that they're seeing? So those were just a couple of things that, you know, we've been really thinking about. So here's the questions set of it. And then we wanted to give some time for Q&A with you all if you have any questions for us. Ieshia wrote this in here. Literally our favorite part of most presentations. We love talking with you all more than talking at you all. So yeah, we just wanted to leave some time for some discussion with everybody here. Ieshia, anything you want to add there? Just want to make sure.
No, I think you did beautifully.
Thanks. Yeah. So if there's any questions or anyone wants to like talk through anything, we're definitely available. I know we're also running up on our time. Is that right, Wen?
Yeah, but it's totally okay. I think what we can do actually is I can just do a quick close and then we can spend our informal time that we usually have, the 15 minutes past, as Q&A as well. And so first off, just want to thank Ieshia and Lauren for facilitating such a great session. And thank you, Students Run Philly Style, for doing this session with us. We really appreciate y'all, and we're excited about this. And then second, I'd like to thank everyone for joining the this Lunch and Learn session. Look out for details for our next session. It'll be on January 27th. We'll be joined by UCLA Brain Sport on youth and concussion-related sports injuries. So we're really excited for that. And so that's all I have for close. Once again, thank you, Ieshia and Lauren. We'll open it up for Q&A for the rest of the session. And for those who need to hop off, feel free. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
I have a question for both of you. What have you found has been a kind of a surprise, your biggest surprise, I guess I'll say, of like, oh, we thought this was going to be so awful because no in-person race, in-person races, but actually we came out of it knowing this, we found out this other thing was also really amazing.
That is a great question.
Yeah.
I feel like I've had multiple little answers to that. I don't know if I have one big answer to that question. I'm trying to think. We have had some small successes in this that I think are, we had smaller numbers than we normally do, but we got to get a lot more input from the students that were participating during this time. And so like we had a focus group last week, and one of the questions was, what's one thing you would keep from this time? And most people were like, nothing. And this one girl said, I actually would keep having a virtual option for races because my friend gets really anxious in big crowds and she didn't want to do Students Run before, but she wanted to do it this year because she could and she didn't have to go to a big race. So some of the things that came out of this were really beautiful and small, I feel like. I don't think anyone wants to run with a mask ever after this year, but like some of the things like that where the kids got to see this in a different way, I think was really cool. I don't know, Ieshia, if you have anything big, I don't know. I just have like little moments like that where I was like, oh, that made it worth it,
I think for me, one of the cool things, so I lead our charge kind of around like mentoring and training, and I get to curate a lot of things. And so we have a big conference, and so there are speakers in different subjects and around mentoring, and so this summer we got to host our 6 weeks of conversations, and so we focused it around this thing called like Ready, Set, Goal, is how we focus like kind of our talk around like race and health and inequity and stuff. And we had a student who did virtual Broad Street, and he was interviewed by the news, and his highlight was really having quality conversations around like race and justice. And so I was like, whoa, like you had this like spotlight on TV to talk about running, and you really got to highlight kind of these, because we don't really craft the conversations that our young people are having with their mentors. Like when you're out there running 20 miles, you got space and time. And so, we don't really know what those conversations look like, but we can talk about, like, we kind of talk about with our mentors, things that may come up, common things, how to start, build a relationship, how to maintain it. So we talked about that in a virtual setting, but it was just really cool. And Mari's actually here, and we were doing one of the summer things, and he was learning Spanish, and he and Mari had a really cool conversation about appropriation versus appreciation. And so it was just like really cool. And so I think for me, it was just COVID kind of put me in a place where I got to see my work again, or like the work that I kind of get to do at our program in a different way. And so sometimes like I know that those conversations are happening, and I'm hoping that during our like quarterly meetings and we're talking about our relationships with young people and how to build them, that they're happening. But it was nice to just kind of be in them and be able to kind of instruct this summer in a virtual session and have like so many of our teams all on in this Zoom session, because we don't get that opportunity. Our teams are all running at their own schools after school, but the summer allowed us all to be one big program virtually and have those conversations and breakouts together. So we're thinking about what that looks like for our young people and being able to maybe continue to meet in some ways in a virtual setting to keep those conversations going and having them be able to meet each other in this way.
That's a great question. From another runner, I know. Paul has a question, I think. Or he's saying bye, I don't know.
Thanks. I really have a lot. There was a lot to think about, in this presentation in terms, I just want to tell you that, Lauren, I was told Ieshia in our breakout group, I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of board of director volunteers and really starting to rethink their experience with more of a give and take that you've sort of outlined as really key, because it's often boards come with a give perspective, but really focusing on what can they take out of it. So I do have to jump, but I just want to thank you again. That was awesome.
That's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. Love that you're applying it in other ways. That's really cool. Thanks, Paul.
I have a question for both of you. Both of y'all have a lot of years of volunteering with Students Run Philly Style before joining staff. And I would love to kind of hear from that experience on a personal level of how the give and get kind of changed for you, and if there was burnout or if how the expectations were kind of set or reset during the 4 to 5 years, I think, that each of y'all had doing that. Yeah.
So our Students Run life overlaps all the way. Ieshia and I, we both started at the same time. We just joined the staff at slightly different times, but pretty close. And I think we both have really different, we talk about this all the time too, probably really different reasons we came to Students Run. And so mine is really like, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school and loved sports my whole life, and really came to this like thinking a lot about what am I going to give here. And so I probably am definitely more on that side of like, I'm going to volunteer, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And what I got out of it was so much more. And so like the experience itself shaped my expectations like pretty quickly, because I think I got so much more out of it. I don't think I would have ever kept running like this. Like I had run like 1 half marathon before joining Students Run, but I don't know that I would have done a marathon without it. And so like it's become a huge part of my life because of the community piece that I think so many people talked about. So it changed my way of looking at sports. I think that's the huge get for me. It's been a game changer. But Ieshia has we have flipped experiences here. So
yeah, so as Lauren knows, I always jokingly say I did remedial PE. It was like, what do I need to do to graduate? Like, give me the ball, I will toss it and get out of here. And so I was not a sports person. I actually just kind of, in my own personal lived experience, I moved to Philadelphia for college, ended up coming back for a job. And it was very important to me to be part of the community that I was living in. And so I also had this weird thing that this is what I thought young professionals did. I was like, oh, you wake up in the morning, you go for a run, you go to work, right? So I was learning all these new things, right? First person to go to college, first person to graduate, new city, new career. So I was doing all the things that I thought you had to do. And so my boss actually was part of Students Run. She's on the board now. So at my first job in Philadelphia, and she introduced me to the program. And so that's how I found out about it. And I think the hook for me was and I've always worked with young people, mostly through like college access and stuff. And I found that like young people were always coming to me kind of saying, you've done this, I want to do it. And so that was always my mentor-mentee relationship with young people. And Students Run was the first time that I had this unique opportunity to do something with a young person at the exact same time. So we were both running our first mile together. We were both like, so my first Broad Street was some of my students' first Broad Street. And so that experience of like having a shared goal, and like, it wasn't really like my expertise that kind of had them seek out the relationship. It was really this like interesting concept of honesty. Like, how are you through this? I'm barely getting through it. and we could share that together, that crafted our experience. And so I just felt like I had a different relationship with this group of young people. I lived in West Philly. This team was in West Philly. So then I also got to see people in the grocery store, and like I would go on a morning run and they would be walking to school. And so it really gave me this sense of community. And that's always what I wanted. You know, 'cause I grew up in a place where like a lot of people came to volunteer and nobody stayed and nobody like lived there. And so I always knew that in my own kind of adult life, I wanted to live and volunteer and be in community with people. And so Students Run really gave me that opportunity. And so I think it was more of the gets. And I had never run before. So I got the sneakers, I got the race entries. Like it was all of these things that helped me a lot that, you know, I didn't have to worry about to connect with young people. So they took away even the barriers for me to be able to like think that I could volunteer. I think sometimes also volunteering is looked at as this thing of like you have to be in a space to be able to give. And Students Run even took away some of those barriers for me to be able to do that.
Do you guys think that sorry, just one more question. Don't you think like the virtual run thing is the weirdest thing? Because when this all started, I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's like telling me that the concert has been canceled, but I can still pay my money to listen to a CD. Like, why would I do that? And then now I've done a bunch of them, and I think like, okay, it's still kind of cool because you get a medal in the mail, and you still get like a T-shirt in the mail, and this year, I guess I would say my hometown race up in Spokane, Washington, the Bloomsday. It's a 12K. It's a weird race. It's 12K. But I got my sister doing it for the first time, and I just bugged her. I'm like, it's virtual this year. You don't have to worry about anyone seeing you or judging you or like any of that. Like, just like we'll do it together. We'll do it on the same day. We'll do it together. And she did it for the first time. I think we did it when we were kids, and she hasn't done it for decades. So it's also a way to kind of do it anonymously and sort of build a level of confidence, and then say like, okay, I did Bloomsday last year. Now I'll do it for real this year and cross the finish line and all of that. And they didn't give out medals. They gave out T-shirts, but you could order medals. So I ordered her a medal and had it shipped to her house, and then she opened it up after she did the race. So it's a way to secretly do it if you haven't done it before, and I think it'll spur more people running next year. So I'm really excited.
I'm not a runner. I participated in my first 5K this year because it was virtual, and I did it in my backyard. I have a long driveway, but normally it's like 100 times there and back for 1 mile. But I'm horrified of COVID, so I won't run my community, nothing like that. I'm like, I'm just gonna stay here. And that's like, it motivated me to go, okay, I'm gonna keep practicing at keeping a good pace and trying to see how long I can run for. So I finally did a 5K.
That's awesome.
Congrats, Danielle. I love it.
Way to go. And congrats to your sister, Hillary, too.
Yeah.
Big deal. We definitely saw that, I think, with some of our kids. Some of our students really, like we had them do a 20K to finish out the year, which is a distance we never run because it's not on our regular calendar. But one of our students did it and was like, I'm definitely going to do the half marathon next year. And before, she might not have done that. So I think it has been like a quiet confidence boost for some people. So it's really cool to hear. And so I guess I would agree with you, Hillary. Yeah, there's some bright sides to it.
Creative. This is awesome. Thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Really, really cool program you guys have.
Thanks. We like it. But yeah, so we're here.
I'm going to jump off. Thanks, you guys.
Hey, y'all. Any other questions for Lauren and Ieshia?
We'll get back to our snowstorm here.
Yeah, I'm jealous. Very, very jealous. Well, thank you again, y'all. Really, really appreciate this. I think it incredibly helpful for a lot of people, because I think volunteer engagement is often not as intentional as it could be, and I think this really kind of like sparks a lot of ideas. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing so much of y'all with us. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for giving us the space to try something new.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll reach out to y'all. I think we usually have the follow-up email and whatnot, and we have the recording of this session. And one of the things that we're looking into doing in the future is putting our recordings up on, like, hosting them on like YouTube or something like that, and then doing some more kind of callbacks to sessions we've had in the past. And so I'll reach out to y'all and kind of see what would be beneficial for y'all as well. Give and get, right?
There you go.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. Have a great holiday break.
Oh,
you too.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.